Welcome to Part 3 of Chapter 13, Theories of Personality. In this section, we're going to focus in on Freud's psychosexual stages, which for many is considered to be probably the most controversial part of his theory. One is because it kind of ran contrary to the Victorian beliefs in Vienna when it was created, but it also is the area where we're going to see the sexism come out in his theory, or supporting the accusations of sexism in his theory in relationship to differences in male and female personality development. Now, Freud, there's been a question about whether Freud was a sexist, and one of the things you have to realize that of the half a dozen children that he had, which included boys as well as girls, his closest relationship was to his daughter Anna, who I'm not sure was named after Anna O or not, but they were very close. And in fact, in the later years, she was the youngest of the children, and she would eventually carry on Sigmund Freud's teachings. And speaking of teachings, Freud back in his day, the way that he shared his theory is that he wrote a lot. But one of the key aspects of it was that he used to do study groups at his house once a week. And what he would do is select other doctors from around Vienna to join him as he would sit down and present and talk about the writings and the theory as he developed it. And so they would meet for maybe 2.5, 3 hours on an evening, 15 minutes for social time, and then get into some heavy discussion about the theory and its dynamics and what he was doing and why he was doing it. And finishing up the evening with him more or less putting the closing note on it. And this is the way that he kind of more or less disseminated his theory back in that time. Started a society in Vienna, and eventually he took it internationally and had the International Psychoanalytic Association, which Anna will take over when Freud dies and try to continue on the development of his work. So then give you just a little bit of background of how he shared it. Freud was not a real tolerant gentleman. If you had views that differed from him, he was not interested in hearing them, and oftentimes he would be asked to leave his inner circle or his own personal study group because of that. So, okay. Anyways, we started talking about the psychosexual stages, and we said that during each of these, the id is going to be focused on finding pleasure through the erogenous zones as they begin to emerge in sensitivity and importance to the young child. So what he did is, in making observations and working with his clients, he divided the development of the personality up into 5 of these psychosexual stages, each involving a conflict that must be resolved for a healthy personality to emerge. The first 3 stages, though, are the ones that are really most critical, because that's where we come into contact with the 3 major erogenous zones and have to resolve conflicts related to those. Okay? If conflict is not resolved, Freud felt that part of our personality may become kind of stuck or fixated at that particular stage. Now, fixated is another term that we hear people, at times people say, well, you're fixated on this, you're stuck on this. But Freud was the one who developed this kind of notion of becoming fixated on various events and in our lives. Okay, here are the 5 stages then. As we can see, we start off with the first stage down here is the oral stage, which runs from about 0 to 18 months. The anal stage picks up around 18 to 36 months or 3 years of age. The phallic stage is the 3rd stage here, which runs from 3 years to 6 years. Then we move into a latency period, which is from about 6 years to puberty. Nothing really happens here, not that much. And then the final stage of development, which goes on from puberty on, is what he referred to as the genital stage. The key thing here is keeping the phallic stage and the genital stage distinctive. Is that oftentimes because phallic, genitalia, and genital here, they can easily get confused, and you want to stay focused on that for, making that distinction for our exam. Okay, let's take us through them then. Okay, let's look at the oral stage. Okay, we said 0 to 18 months. The focus here of the libido, our psychosexual energy force, is the erogenous zone is basically going to be the mouth, but it's going to include the lips and the tongue. And when you watch a little baby, everything goes into the mouth. Everything. It picks everything up and it sticks it in his mouth. And, Freud said, wow, what a source of pleasure. But, probably the key pleasure that we have is feeding off mother's breast or a bottle, and that sucking response. And the big thing that we have to go through here is that we were developing, or we receive all the satisfaction from stimulation of the mouth, and now we're going to have to wean off that sucking response, which is so pleasurable, and go to starting to learn to eat solid foods, drink out of a cup, and things like that. But it's breaking away from the mother's breast that he saw as being some very, very traumatic for the child in this developing phase. If this should go difficult for us, okay, he said that yes, the personality can become fixated. And some examples of ways that we'll see this fixation manifest in adulthood is people who smoke. You always got a cigarette in your mouth. They're still trying to get that sucking in, Didn't get enough of it before. You haven't got over it yet, and so you suck. Overeating can be an example. Being talkative is another way of being orally expressive. And we'll come back after we've run through the stages, and we'll talk a little bit more about the fixations. Okay? During this period of time, during this 0 to 18, the id is present. It's present at birth, and it pretty much dominates during the 0 to 18 period, 18-month period. When we move into the second stage of development, the anal stage, which is from 18 to 36 months, now we see the ego emerging. The ego really starts to emerge probably about a year, maybe even a little bit earlier, but we really start to see it come into its own in a kind of the development of a sense of self within the individual around the 18 to 36 month period. Okay, for the ego to emerge, it is basically going to have to share some of the libido energy that it has to empower the ego, to allow it to fire up in that. And as we said before, the reason that the id does this is because the id right now is very impulsive, but it's starting to learn that it has to function within reality. One, I can't suck on my mother's breast or baby bottle the rest of my life. I've got to learn to start eating, foods and start drinking out of a cup. But because that's been so pleasurable, we don't want to give it up. It's just a nice sense of security and warmth and everything, particularly from sucking on the mother's breast, difficult for the young infant to transition. Okay. But in the anal stage, we've made that transition, hopefully, and in the oral stage, and now the focus starts to become on the anus. This is at a point in time where the sphincter muscles are starting to be well developed. We're starting to develop ability to control them, and now the issue of toilet training comes in. Mom and Dad are getting tired of changing diapers. Okay. And, what they want, the young infant to do, the young baby to do, is to start using the toilet. Well, the thing is that when, for babies, when any tension comes up that they got piddle or, poop, well, basically they just do it. They don't go through any stress or anxiety about that. However, it's one of probably some of the cutest things you see with little kids is you start to teach them to toilet train. There's that ooh, 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 that sense of emergency. You see all the stress and this woe build up in their face, and you would think that they're literally dying, because they're trying to hold it to get it to the bathroom. And this is where they start to learn to, develop some discipline and some some control. And you can see the ego coming in and saying, hey, we can't do this anytime, remember that. There's a time and a place for it. And, let's work. You can't wear diapers the rest of your life. You just can't go around spontaneously doing this. And so we go through this. If it doesn't go well, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and later in life, it can be either characterized as orderliness. You struggled so much with toilet training, and it took you forever to get it, that now everything is going to be perfect. Everything is going to be perfectly structured. You're in control. And so that develops orderliness. On the other side, if this didn't go so well, we really struggled with it, we could also be characterized by messiness. Somebody who has just a terribly messy desk. If Freud walked into your office, he would say, fixated at the anal stage. You have an anal fixation. Okay. So either overly orderly or overly messy. Gotcha. Okay. So, but anyways, the ego's beginning to develop during this period of time. The ego's going to come in a lot of conflict with the id during this period of time. The id still, has the control of the energy. It's still pushing forth its desires, these wish-fulfilling images to meet its needs. And this is where we transition in the third phase, the phallic stage, which goes from 3 to 6 years, is where we begin to see the emergence of the superego as the personality component. Now, back when we were talking about the superego, it's the moral part of our personality. It functions under the moral principle. So when the id is really impulsive and wants all this stuff, and that stuff may get us in trouble, it's basically the superego that says, whoa, you can't have that. That's wrong. That's bad. And if the id, is pushing hard on it, then the superego makes us feel really guiltful, really shameful, really bad about ourselves. And this is the way that it controls. When we follow the way of the superego and we do things that are socially desirable and good, then it instills a sense of pride in us. And so these are the mechanisms that the superego uses. Now, when we come into this phase, the genitalia is basically the focus. And during this period of time is that one of the things little kids will obviously identify is that, when I touch myself there, it tingles. And, this is one of those periods where parents have to be sensitive and caring, is to explain to a child that you don't touch yourself there in public, and, that you can do it when you're in private, but you can't do it in public, and things like that. But with this sexual awakening, comes this striving for sexual identity. At this point in life, for some reason, some way, the little boy learns that he has a penis, and the little girl learns that she doesn't. Now, the little boy has one, the little girl doesn't have one. What happened to the little girls? And the little girl's like, where did mine go? Okay, and this is going to become involved in this part of what we were talking about, is the Oedipus and the Electra complex that are going to develop. The Oedipus complex in the boy is that as I'm going through this sexual identity, is that I have this sexual awakening. What I first do is more or less look to my mother and desire unconsciously to possess her sexually. That a natural attraction between male and female, and she is the female in my life. However, I've got a problem. Dad. Bigger, stronger, more powerful. And with this new awareness that boys have penises and girls don't, maybe there's something I have to lose if I come in conflict with my father. And essentially that is impena, this fear of castration. And this is a big principle in Freud's third stage here, is that boys develop this fear of castration. And so what do I do now? Well, what I do is I turn and I identify with my father. Okay? Cute little thing here is about the identification is the path to resolving both the Oedipal and the Electra complex. But you can see out here why Dad's cutting the lawn. The little boy's got his little lawnmower out here, and he's cutting right along with Dad. Well, it's kind of like, hey, Dad, I'm just like you, aren't I? Hey, big guy, look at me. I'm out here cutting the lawn too. And you wouldn't hurt me, would you? In other words, you wouldn't castrate me. Now, this is all unconscious. Now, little boys and little girls aren't walking around worrying about castration for the boy, or for the girls, we'll see what we refer to as penis envy. These are unconscious thoughts or drives that Freud believed, though, are down there in our minds. Okay, so let me go back here to the Electra complex. The Electra complex is what the girl goes through. The girl has the natural sexual attraction to her father, and she desires him sexually. Once again, this is unconscious. Okay. However, the mother is there as an obstacle. Okay. Now, where the boy has the fear of castration and resolves this through identification with the father, okay, the girl's not as easy out. The girl looks, towards the mother, but basically says, what do I got to lose? I've lost it already. She doesn't have the fear of castration. In fact, it's like, where did my penis go, Mom? Did you take it because you don't have one either? And so this notion of penis envy arises in Freud's theory, is that he felt that the penis is the more dominant, more aggressive sexual organ, the vagina being the receptive, passive, and using this to account for why men are more aggressive, but he also used it more or less to put men in a more superior role to a woman. Is that man is the aggressor, the woman is there basically at his whim. And so, and this is where the sexism starts to come in, and to turn it up, the heat up a little bit, because the girl does not turn and identify with mom as strongly as the boy turns and identifies with her father, with his father. What happens is that the girl doesn't develop morally as strongly as the boy. Realize that the superego is developing during this period. Basically, about 3 to about 7 years of age, we have the superego coming in. Okay? And the girl's personality is going to become fixated because her identification isn't as complete as the boy. And so Freud, looked at this and said, well, gee, this is why women are characterized by envy and jealousy and things like that. And in his private practice with a lot of women, they were coming in and talking about sex. And he's going, my God, they have all these sexual drives and urges. Well, he was a medical doctor. The Hippocratic Oath protected them from him talking about it to anybody else. But these were natural feelings that they had. And about the only person they felt comfortable sharing them with was a medical doctor, because they knew what was said there would stay there. But Freud, read a lot more into these tea leaves, so to speak, and made a big deal about penis envy developing during this particular stage, and women not resolving the Electra complex, and therefore not having as strong of moral development as males. And this will throw feminist leaders of the 1960s like Gloria Steinman just into somersaults, and feeling that Freud created this equilibrium and this notion of male chauvinism, that we're better than women and everything else. And Gloria Steinman, really, she had no place for Freud. He's lucky he died in 1939, or she might have done him in the 1960s. So, okay. So, moving on then to the fourth stage, which is referred to as latency. And latency should indicate is not much is going on down here. Notice that we move into it around 6 to 12, which is interesting, coincides with our hormonal cycle. For about the first 6 years of life, our hormones, our sexual hormones, are really going well, developing basically the primary sex organs and that. From about 6 to 11 or 12 until we hit puberty, they kind of drop off and subside. Now, back then they didn't know that as much as we do today. So it's interesting that Freud picked up on this, though, and basically said that, the libido really doesn't have a focus. Major development during this period of time is defense mechanisms, which are going to be used by the ego. As we talked about, we said the ego's caught in between the superego and the id. They're both unrealistic. They both have their unrealistic demands, and the ego's the one that's left in between them, trying to hold them off as they continue to battle. The id wants something, the ego says, no, you can't have it. The id wants something else, and the ego says, no, you can't. Superego says, no, you can't have it. And the ego's sitting in here going, whoa, 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 whoa. And, hey, let's take a look at this. Let's look at what's, reality. What can I do realistically? What planning, what organization, whatever can I do to help the id satisfy its needs, which are real, and yet also appease the superego. And so this is where the ego comes in between these two very strong forces. But there are times when it can be overwhelming for the ego. And the ego then develops what are referred to as defense mechanisms. And we're going to talk about that shortly here. But defense mechanisms are basically, it's an unconscious mechanism. This is where we slip down into that below the conscious level. And the ego employs these things, such as denial. I love it with little kids. No, I didn't do it. You're sitting there watching them do it. And, you go, what did you do? I didn't do anything. Oh, come on, I saw you do it. No, I didn't do anything. And they just deny it. And that's the way of not experiencing the guilt. The superego over here is starting to pump out as the little kid starts to develop this moral principle. And it's like, no, the id's going, man, that felt really good. I want to do it again. And the superego's going, no, you're going to die. You're going to burn in hell. And the ego is sitting in the middle trying to fend off this off. It gets overloaded and it adopts its defense mechanism to say, no, I didn't do it. And, that's one of the ways of trying to resolve it. Okay. From here, we move into the last phase, which is the genital phase, and it's basically from puberty on. What we can see is focuses on the genitalia, and basically here's where we reach full sexual maturity. The hormones kick back in, the secondary sex characteristics are starting to develop. Both the boy and the girl goes through, her menstruation at this point. The boy's sperm cells now take on, the actual sperm cells or, the seminal fluid for impregnation, and we're kind of ready to go. The whole thing here is trying to identify for the kid, what does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be feminine? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Okay. Now, if all the stages before this went pretty well, the boy should pretty much identify in a masculine way, is that he's lined up and identified with his dad. The girl, on the other hand, is turned and identified and lined up with her mom. So she's very much got this feminine, womanly focus. So the boy has very much the masculine, manly focus. And life should be good after this. We should be sexually mature, and we should live a mentally healthy life. Now, if we become fixated in any of these earlier stages, well, now we're coming into our genitalia period with only part of our life energy force, because other parts are held up, and those are going to kind of drag like anchors, and they're not going to allow us maybe to either reach sexual maturity or to have a mentally healthy lifestyle. They're going to seep up. They're going to nag up. Pain and hurt down here. We shoved it down that long corridor, shoved it into that closet, but it's pressing against that door and it seeps out around it, and it causes us a lot of turmoil. Okay. Let's take a look at the fixations then. In the oral stage, we have two. We have oral receptive, which leads to people who are very trusting, and we're dependent upon others. They desire to suck on things. Oral aggressive, on the other hand, is the person who likes to chew on things. Always look at the end of a pen for somebody, when you see them sucking on it. Are they oral receptive or they oral aggressive? The oral receptive isn't going to have that thing all big bite marks in it. But that oral aggressive, they're going to chomp down on it, and they're going to have a lot of aggression and desire for dominance later in life. Okay. From there, we have anal expressive and anal retentive personalities. The anal expressive are going to be very generous and giving, but they're also going to be messy. They never really learned to hold on to anything, and they're giving it all away now. The anal retentive personality, they have a tendency to be more mean and stubborn, obsessively tidy, very well organized. They save everything. You walk in and somebody's got their dress from when they were a little kid, or their first christening gown and everything else, everything fills in between, that would be an anal retentive personality. Okay. In the phallic stage, the personality that we run into if it doesn't go well is what we call phallic personality type, is where they're characterized by being self-assured or vain. Up here we have the young guy gazing into the water at his reflective image. And, for here in this vanity is that we always want to look at ourselves. We can't pass the mirror without stopping to take a look at how we are. We'll never pass up a compliment. And I'll never stop looking at a reflection because, boy, I get handsomer by the minute, don't I? And that's one of the signs of this vanity. But they're going to be self-assured, vain, and impulsive. And then we have the genital personality. Now, this is where everything has gone well, things haven't become fixated, and we'll wind up with a well-adjusted, mature, able to love and be loved posture for the rest of our lives. Okay, here's those defense mechanisms I was talking about earlier, and you can see there are 6 that are laid out here. Freud actually identified, about 15 to 20 different ones, and some are kind of subparts of these and that, but these are the major ones. Now, realize that defense mechanisms are things that are implemented by the ego to help it deal with the conflict between the id and the superego, and it kind of getting pulled and shredded in the middle. They are unconscious. Most of the time, we're not aware of them. Sometimes when people are in denial, they're not aware of denial. I can't tell you a number of alcoholics I've worked with over the years. They say, I don't have a drinking problem. Here you've watched them being stumbling down, falling drunk, and that, I don't have a drinking problem, and I love it even better. And they say, well, you think I got a drinking problem? Well, look at Harry over there. Look at what he drinks, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then, look at Mary over there, and she drinks da-da-da-da-da. But I don't have a problem. I can control it. Yeah, well, you haven't done that in, how many years, and look at what your life is like. But they're not even aware of the denial. In working with addicts, one of the first things you have to do is break through that denial. And until they break through denial, acknowledge that they're an alcoholic, they're probably never, ever going to get better. Okay? But anyways, so we kind of talked about denial down here at the bottom, so I guess let's work our way up the list from there. So it's refusing to believe or even perceive painful realities. I don't want to think about anything that's painful. I deny that it ever happened. Okay? An example would be a partner denies evidence of his loved one affair. I may think she's having an affair, but I don't want to think about it. I deny it. I put it off. And other people are looking at me, they're around me saying, didn't you see that happen? It was so obvious. Look at the way she was dressing, the hours that she was spending out. And you're just kind of like, huh? Like a deer caught in headlights. Okay. Displacement is another one. It's a shifting of sexual or aggressive impulses toward a more acceptable or less threatening object or person. You ever had a bad exam and want to come home and kick the dog? You ever gone out to your car in the parking lot, throw that thing in the drive and just burn the rubber for, several feet? And that, the poor car. Okay. But here it's like, an example here, a little girl kicks the family dog after her mother sends her to her room. She might also kick her brother or sister as well, but that's displacing my anger out onto somebody else. And we're not aware that that's why we're doing it. The mother says, why did you kick the dog? I don't know. And, we have a form of denial there, but it's a displacement of the anger. Rationalization, offering self-justifying explanations in the place of real, more threatening, unconscious reasons for one's actions. And that, as a habitual drinker, says she drinks with her friends just to be social. Nothing more. I'm not addicted to the drug. I'm just out there being social. And, we stay out at night and, sometimes we may drink 10, 12 beers, but just being social and that. And just rationalize it away. But, we use rationalization in a lot of other things. One of my favorite ones to talk about is we had some trees come down in a storm years ago, and I went out to Home Depot and to buy a chainsaw. Before I left, my wife and I discussed the budget and kind of came up with what we could spend. And when I got to Home Depot, you don't send a guy to Home Depot to buy a chainsaw. Here I am looking at the chainsaws laid out, and for what my budget could afford, it was this little dinky little thing. And then next to it is the steel tooth beaver, the man's machine. When I crank that puppy up, the whole neighborhood's going to know I'm sawing wood. And, what did I buy? Yeah, I bought the bigger one. Okay. But when I came home, as I'm driving home, I'm feeling all this guilt. I'm like, oh my gosh, my wife's going to eat me alive for this. But by the time I walked through that door and my wife saw the size of that box and the size of the chainsaw, she knew I didn't pay what our budget could afford. But I said, honey, I was talking to the guy, the salesman, and geez, he told me about this feature and that feature, and these big engines last longer, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, she just sat there, my loving wife, rolled her eyes and, yeah, I understand, honey. Unfortunately for me, I am still using that chainsaw nearly 20 years later. And need I say, every time we need to go out and cut something up with that chainsaw, I remind her what a good purchase it was. And if I'd bought that small one, we'd probably be on our 5th chainsaw by now. So anyways, projection. The next one up on the list is disguising one's own threatening impulses by attributing them to others. And, the thief out there, thinks that everyone is a thief. Well, everybody steals. Everybody cheats. And this is one of the ways that we do it. It can be whether everybody cheats on tests or everybody cheats on their spouse or girlfriend or things like that. And what I do is I project this. But, another way it would be is that I'm feeling guilty about maybe wanting to have an affair. And I see my wife, look at some other guy, and I start accusing her up and down. Oh, you interested? What, you want to go out with him? And she's like, come on, honey, what are you talking about? And it's my projection of my guilt onto her, such that if she wants to have an affair, then it's not so bad for me. Okay. Reaction formation is switching unacceptable impulses into their opposites. An example here, repressing angry feelings, a person displays exaggerated friendliness. Rather than me really showing how ticked off I am, I turn to sugar and sweetness on, and just sugar and sweet to you and nice, and you're like, what the heck's going on here? And that, but that's reaction formation. It may be another example of it is that maybe somebody who is very oriented towards looking at porn on the internet, becomes head of the committee at church that leads a battle against internet porn. And this is reaction formation. I feel real guilty about looking at it. So now I'm going to go out and I'm going to campaign against it in my church. And that's a socially desirable behavior, and I don't feel so bad. Regression is the biggie. And this is the one that really got Freud going. And is the most major one, because this is how things wind up down in the unconscious, and how our unconscious winds up being so large. Excuse me. No, I'm talking about repression. Okay, up here, repression. This is the key one here, is that I banish those anxiety arousing impulses deep down back into my unconscious, throw them down that hall, open that door, toss them in, and lock it on up and keep them there. And that's how our unconscious becomes so big. And it's a key element in Freud's theory. Regression is different in a sense that it's retreating to a more infantile psychosexual stage, where some psychic energy remains fixated. And this is one of the ways that we can determine a fixation is we'll watch where a person regresses to. What age grouping? Is it back in the anal, the oral, the phallic stage? So we have a little boy who reverts to oral comfort of his thumbs sucking in a car on his way home on his first day of school. Okay, or on his way to first day of school. All of a sudden, you haven't seen him suck his thumb in, a couple years, and all of a sudden the little boy's sucking his thumb. And what Freud would say, aha, that is typical of an oral stage. Somebody who's going into a big meeting that they're very nervous about, and they light up a cigarette, or they light up a cigar or a pipe, or they start becoming extremely talkative, or they're diving for the snack machine. They got to have some junk food to eat. He would say, aha, there's an oral fixation. And this is the way that we determine it, is when we regress back to behaviors that are typical of earlier years in our lives, and usually where some energy has remained fixated. So, okay, that wraps up part 3, and we'll move on to part 4 and talk about the Neo-Freudians and analyzing the psychoanalytic perspective. The Neo-Freudians are going to be a group of individuals who followed Freud initially and then thought differently. And as we talked about earlier, Freud was not too generous to those folks.